There are certain moments in the Tanakh that have entered our general popular culture. Certainly the image of Moses standing at the edge of the Red Sea and lifting his hands as Adonai parted the water, allowing the fleeing Israelites safety, has become so well known that high school student sections have started using this as a celebration in the middle of basketball games. If you don't believe me, you should look it up on YouTube. The video is amazing. A student is dressed as Moses, and the Red Sea parts, and he runs up the stairs. It is incredible. I think the team actually lost the game, though, so maybe it's not awesome. In the same vein, the image of the golden calf, the idea of a false idol to pray to. What's that? And what we read about this week has become really, really well known. I want to add a little bit of perspective on why I think we should have a little bit of empathy for the Israelites. Talk a little bit about leadership. And talk a little bit about the way in which maybe Adonai was not being a terrific leader at this moment. This Parshat, this is Tisa, it opens innocuously enough. Certainly it talks about a census of all the Israelites, but of course all the Israelite men, because that's the only people who would have counted in a census at the time. And then it has a brief aside to talk about the way that Adonai has specifically assigned different artisans the responsibility of constructing different parts of the tabernacle. All right, so far, so much in line with the most recent few Torah portions. There's details and measurements, and it doesn't really get interesting until we read about how the fact that Moses has gone up the mountain to speak with Adonai. And the Israelites, who had been, remember, led out of Egypt by Moses, looked to him as their leader. They were uncertain when or if he would come back. Yes, Aaron was still there. And presumably you can think that the court system that Moses set up, that we read about a few weeks ago, still functions. But without Moses, the people were getting uneasy. And they turned to Aaron. They demanded of him, make us a god who shall go before us. For that fellow Moses who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him. I really like the translation of the word to fellow, which feels very proper. Aaron looks around and sees the distress of the people, and maybe he's fearing a mutiny. Maybe he feels that he is going to be attacked, that violence is in the cards. He instructs them to take all the gold they have and melt it down. And he shapes it into a golden calf, offering it as a stand-in for people to pray to, somewhere a leader. We know, because we've read the Ten Commandments already, that this violates the second commandment. And certainly there's be an expectation that Adonai would be angry. But it seems to me, on reading this, that the response of Adonai to this is entirely disproportionate. Adonai commands Moses to tell the house of Levi to kill all the people, men, women, and children, who were involved in this idolatry. That's 3,000 men, women, and children. This is an attempt to force the Israelites back in line. He refers to the Israelites as a stiff-necked people. Not exactly a leadership style that would win many followers, except those who are afraid of being killed. Which leads me to my major point. Adonai is at best a flawed leader in this circumstance. You understand anger? But the reality is that Adonai fundamentally misunderstood the golden calf. As I think the idea of a golden calf has also been fundamentally misunderstood. This is an election year. We're going to hear the term golden calf thrown around quite a lot without nuance or context. But what I want to make sure that we are clear about is that the Israelites were not afraid of the lack of Adonai. They were clear that Adonai existed. He had parted the Red Sea, had given the 10 Commandments. This was not, anybody who was still confused was not paying attention. No, what the people were afraid of was the lack of Moses. He had disappeared. And when you go up a mountain like that, there's no guarantee that you're coming back. There was no way to be clear that Moses was coming back. And desperate for leadership, they turned to Aaron, not a natural-born leader, who sanctioned the idolatry. But let's have some empathy for this people who had, after all, not that long ago, been slaves, had then been freed in the middle of the night, had seen the water part of the Red Sea, had wandered in the desert, had received the 10 Commandments, and now had no leader. And we're still in the middle of the desert. Let's just acknowledge what the context of the golden calf is. This is not to say the golden calf was a good idea. No, it was bad. But was it killing 3,000 people bad? And that's sort of a decision that we have to make as we read this. Leaders have to have the capacity to acknowledge mistakes. And no one come after me and say that, well, Adonai, as supreme being, has no need to do so. Adonai has already done this. After Noah and the flood, we already have an example of Adonai recognizing an error. So this is not something that is unprecedented in the Torah. As I was preparing this, I was thinking one night earlier this week, or maybe last weekend, I was tired, and I have 2 kids, and I was cranky, and I snapped at my son over something. I don't know what it was. It wasn't my response was disproportionate. And so when I was reading to him later that night, before Captain Underpants, you guys read Captain Underpants? My son is real into it.
I think it's bad now, no?
Not in my house, clearly. We don't ban books in my house. But I made sure to tell him, look, Daddy was tired and cranky and in a bad mood, and I should not have used that kind of tone. And he said, what are you talking about? But I wanted to model the idea that it's okay to say, hey, I was wrong. As we keep going through the story of Moses, which is really the rest of the year, we're going to have a lot of opportunity to praise his leadership. We praised it when he created the court system. Of course, he listened to Yitro. We will praise it many other times. But I think it's also important to recognize that Moses disappeared up a mountain, leaving the people without a leader, which is not awesome. We all know what it's like to have a bad coach, a coach who gets on you for no reason. We all know what it's like to have a boss who does not want to hear your opinion. But we also know the pleasure of working for someone or under someone or learning from someone who sees you. Doesn't mean that person is perfect, but recognizes what you need. I want us to keep, as we go into the rest of the story of Moses, this idea of Tanakh as a reflection of leadership in the back of our heads, and how this affects the narrative and how it affects the journey of the Israelites to the Promised Land. And I wanted to take another small moment and change gears for a second. I've tried to avoid using this platform to talk about general world events, really since October 7th. Not really what this is for. It should be a place of unity and a place of safety. And these are things that we are constantly bombarded with. But this week, I don't think I can avoid talking about Berkeley and talking about Harvard. For those of you who are unaware, at Berkeley, which is University of California in Berkeley, California, just outside San Francisco. They're having a speaker, an Israeli speaker, just a speaker. And the event was attended by a number of Jewish students and a mob, I think is the only real way to describe it, basically shut down the event, breaking windows, assault. There was injuries. It was violence. These are Jewish students on a campus, a public school campus in our country. And then the next day or the day after, I'd have to look, a concert by an Israeli singer put on by the Harvard Chabad was similarly disrupted. And seeing these events and the response or lack thereof, and reading the accounts of the students who had gone through it, and the advisors, my colleagues who work at Harvard, my colleagues who work at Berkeley, it just makes me grateful that we can gather every Friday night and Saturday and nosh and tabling without fear of assault. It doesn't mean UCF or Rollins are perfect. I would like to be very clear, but I am grateful to be able to gather with all of you tonight in this space. Shabbat Shalom.